Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Loveland Opera Theater's first vlog, Backstage with the Opera. We're really excited that you're joining us, and we have some great artists and guests here with us today. We're really excited that you're coming to learn just a little bit more about opera. And today we're going to be talking about the subject of the state of opera. Now, that's a huge topic that we could probably spend, a few hours talking about, if not a few days. But we're really excited that we have some great guests who are going to just talk a little bit about their perspectives in working in opera, both here in Colorado and around the country and the world, and what they know about what's going on in the state of opera. Of course, it's an interesting state right now with COVID happening, but we're going to talk about all the different states pre and post COVID as well as during COVID. I am Timothy Kennedy, and I am the artistic director of Loveland Opera Theater. And we also have with us the executive director and founder of Loveland Opera Theater, Juliana Bishop Hoch. Thanks for being with us, Juliana.
Thank you, Tim. So happy to be here.
And then we have three wonderful artists who have sung with Loveland Opera throughout the ages, and we're really excited to bring them here. I'm going to go in order of voice part, so no favorites, just going by the normal opera rules. So first, I'd like to introduce Dana Kinney, who is a mezzo-soprano. Dana has sung with us a couple of times, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about her relationship with Colorado and the opera. But first, I want to just tell you a little bit about her illustrious career so far, even though she's still building her career too. Dana is both a singer and a stage director, so she'll bring both of those perspectives today to us. And she has been recognized as a consummate storyteller with a warm and clear tone. She was recently seen in the title role of Carmen with Bel Canto Legacy, Dorabella in Così fan tutte with us, Loveland Opera Theater, and Lola in Cavalleria Rusticana with Boulder Opera Company. Other recent performances include Mercedes in Carmen and Tisbe in La Cenerentola in upstate New York with Opera Ithaca. And she will return to Boulder Opera Company this spring to direct a production of L'Enfant et les Sortilèges. Last season, she returned to her alma mater, Colorado State University, as a guest director for a production of The Wandering Scholar. She has also directed for Fort Collins Opera in productions of Amal and the Night Visitors, Daughter of the Regiment, and Thunder of Horses. Additionally, she has served on the directing and production staffs of the Dallas Opera, the Syracuse Opera, and Opera Steamboat, also formerly known as Emerald City Opera. What a great career you've had so far, Dana. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have tenor Nathan Snyder. Nathan Snyder sets himself apart with his energetic performances, commanding stage presence, and attentive musicianship. Praised by Jernigan's Opera Journal as lovely in his portrayal of Fenton in The Merry Wives of Windsor, which was for Loveland Opera, and riveting in his performance as Don Jose in Carmen, Nathan attentively molds the music and characters together throughout the opera repertoire. Recently, Nathan performed with Opera Kansas as Frederick in a sold-out production of Pirates of Penzance in February. Just following this February performance, unfortunately, the pandemic hit in 2020, resulting in many cancellations, including a season with Ohio Light Opera as a part of their Young Artist program. While experiencing many cancellations, Nathan was able to perform the role of Rodolfo in Puccini's masterpiece La Bohème in a socially distanced production with Boulder Opera. Nathan frequently performs the music of Mozart, including Ferrando in Così fan tutte, Don Ottavio in Don Giovanni, Belmonte in Die Entführung aus dem Serail, and Tamino in Die Zauberflöte, and the tenor soloist for Mozart's Requiem, which he was set to reprise in April of 2020 until the pandemic hit. Outside of Mozart's wonderful music, Nathan has performed a variety of roles in the operatic repertoire, ranging from Ruggiero in Puccini's La Rondine and Nemorino in Donizetti's L'Elisir d'Amore, to more modern operas, including Martin in Aaron Copland's The Tenderland and the title role in Britain's Albert Herring. Thanks for being here, Nathan.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And then finally, we have Andrew Porter, bass. Andrew Porter has garnered increasing demand across the country for his larger-than-life stage presence and voice to match. Of his recent performance in L'Elisir d'Amore, Opera Today hailed with his huge, all-encompassing bass voice and precise comic timing, he nearly stole the show. That was just being nice for the soprano, I'm sure. This season, Potter makes several role debuts, including Ferrando in Il Trovatore, Hunding in Die Walküre, and Vodnik in Rusalka. Additionally, he performs the role of Kinney in La Boheme with Anchorage Opera and Indianapolis Opera, makes his Tulsa Opera debut as the King in The Little Prince, returns to Pacific Opera Project to reprise the role of Zoroastro in The Magic Flute, performs the role of Death in the world premiere of Rick Sowash's Death and the Everyman, and Don Alfonso in Così fan tutte with Mid-Ohio Opera. Simone in Johnny Skiki with Southern Illinois Music Festival, and the Bonds in Madame Butterfly with St. Petersburg Opera. Recent engagements also include Osman in Die Entführung aus dem Serai with Opera Orlando, Il Commendatore in Don Giovanni with Pacific Opera Project, Dr. Dulcamara in L'Elysère d'Amore with Winter Opera St. Louis, Tom in Un ballo in Maschera, and Michel in Il Tabaro with Mid-Ohio Opera. Fafner in Das Rheingold, and Kinney in La Boheme with Pittsburgh Festival Opera, and Zoroastro in Die Zauberflöte with Southern Illinois Music Festival. Those are a lot of words.
Definitely.
Thanks for being here, Andrew. What's it like to hear your bio read by somebody else?
Oh, it's always weird. It's always weird. It kind of makes you want to go hide under a rock.
But it's important for people to know that we've got some great singers here with us, great performers, and a great director on top of it with Dana. So thanks so much for being here. So first of all, I'd just love to have each of you, and I'll just start with you, Dana. I'm going to pick, but then the rest of you can fight over it. I'd love for you to talk about just your connection with Colorado and with Loveland Opera, and why you're here and how you got to be with Loveland Opera.
Yeah, definitely. I grew up in Colorado, near Denver, just a suburb of Denver, and I went to school, University of Northern Colorado for my undergrad and Colorado State for my master's. And after my undergrad, year 2011 is when I met Juliana, as she asked me to direct the Act 2 scene from La Boheme for the gala performance. And that was my first experience. That was like my first job outside of school. And that's when I really started to meet all local artists in Colorado. And then I came back in 2012 to assist you, Tim, with first HMS Pinafore, and then again for a full production of La Boheme. And then had the opportunity to sing with the company for Così fan tutte. So I just keep coming back for more and more.
We won't complain about that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go next because mine's very, very simple. I actually, my connection with Colorado is simply singing. I have no relatives in Colorado. I have nothing going on. I actually got started in kind of the Colorado network, as it were, with Boulder Opera. Then went on to sing there with the Boulder Phil, and worked there with you guys at Loveland. So Colorado, I have no family. It's not my roots, but I got to tell you, it has absolutely become one of my favorite states of the Union, only rivaled by Alaska. So that's I love it out there and can't wait to get back.
So I grew up in the western part of Colorado and went to school out in Kansas, and eventually was told, hey, you may be able to sing, you may be able to do this, go to grad school, figure it out. I went to UNC. I say I went to UNC purely because of the teachers there, but really it was the only grad school that took me. Thankfully, because everything's pretty worked out. I went there. I was told by my teacher that, hey, you need to start auditioning for professional companies. Start off. There's a great company right down the road, Loveland Opera. I didn't take his advice right away, as what often happens, but eventually I did. The first time with Loveland was understudying Pirates of Penzance, and then the next year I just kept coming back. You guys kept doing shows that had nice tenor roles, so I it's your guys' fault. You do a show with a nice tenor role, I'm going to come back. It's been a blast. It's a unique experience with Loveland. The kind of the camaraderie that I've felt with my colleagues and with the staff of. It's something that I haven't really found anywhere else. It's, every once in a while you go out for a drink, but not as much as, hey, you'll call somebody up just to see how you're doing, which is kind of the feel that Loveland has. It's very unique. It's very comforting, and it is a blast. So yeah, that's how I got involved there.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Juliana, do you want to talk a little bit about how you got involved with Loveland Opera?
Oh boy. Well, I've loved opera all my life. Sang professionally all over the world. Came to Colorado to do my doctorate, which was voice performance and pedagogy with an opera directing secondary. And I was teaching privately, and I had all these fantastic students in my living room. And I thought, we really should start an opera company with these people because they're so talented. Why not? I never thought I'd start an opera company, but a friend of mine had a dream that I did this, and she got up at 3 a.m. and documented the whole thing. So I thought, well, okay, so God put this idea in her head. Maybe I should follow through with this. And I did. 16 years ago, I founded Loveland Opera Theatre with $500 and a dream. And it has just been the greatest joy of my life. I've loved it so much. And we've watched it grow, and we've continued to nurture it. And these wonderful singers have blessed us with their beautiful voices and their wonderful personalities and great acting skills. And we've got great plans for the future. So it's just been an incredible journey.
So we can't talk about the state of opera without talking about the state that we're currently in, which is the state of COVID affecting our world. And unfortunately, it has majorly affected all of the arts, but definitely the opera world. So I'd love to talk a little bit first about just having each of you give us a little experience about how COVID has affected you personally as artists. I think, the more we hear these stories and the more we kind of can understand that, the more we can really get what it's like to be an artist in a time like this. So who would like to kick it off?
I'm happy to jump in here. This was... It's kind of crazy. This was going to be actually my busiest season to date. I had 18 roles that were coming up and have been canceled due to the pandemic. I was in Indianapolis. We were about to go into Tech Week. I was singing Il Commendatore, one of my mainstays, I guess, and with just a star-studded cast. I mean, it was just really a blessing to be there. And then, of course, March 13th happened, and that's when things kind of just tumbled downhill. We tried a couple of ideas as far as, do we want to try and make this show happen? And then just decided as an artist community there that wasn't the best way to go. And so we canceled that show, and then they just dropped like flies. Lost 9 shows in that first week, and then they continued to fall throughout the summer. Luckily, I am one of the blessed ones in that I do have some things on the horizon. We had some recent stuff come up actually just this week. So, but it's been a quiet year. And it all was it really did happen all of a sudden. I mean, mid gig hotel in Indianapolis, and just watched everything just kind of fall apart. So that's kind of the story from my point of view.
For me, I starting in the new year, I had an audition in New York, and then an audition in Indianapolis in February, and then I was scheduled for another audition in New York in March. And I didn't necessarily have a lot of contracts in line for the year. It was more of like the prep of that. So it was just coaching every week. I was taking voice lessons every other week, just constant auditioning and practicing, and while working a full-time job on top of that. And then I actually did have 2 directing jobs scheduled up through the summer. And so when everything hit and everything was canceled, I was really fortunate just to keep working at my full-time job that I have already. And there was a moment where I realized I burnt myself out before this, because it hit, and then besides the fact of trying to like survive and the terrifying notion of not really knowing what's going on and if I'm going to get sick or if my family is sick, I did have a moment just to breathe and reflect and just think, that's not a sustainable life for me. So how can I rethink how I want to do this moving forward and just kind of get clear about what I want to do? And throughout the pandemic, I think there's a lot of pressure on artists that you have to be creating or practicing or doing something during this time there's pressure that we put on ourselves. But really, we are in a state of survival mode right now. And so there were moments where I just, I didn't work on music a lot or singing. And I was just doing a lot of work for myself and my sanity, really. And then the moments of inspiration and joy came in, and it's found itself to me again in a way without having to force that and feel guilty for not doing it every single day like I was. So it was really a transformative time for myself with and what it means for me to be an artist. And so yeah, that was my experience so far. Still kind of in it in a way, but
my experiences was similar to Andrew's, just at a much lesser scale. This was going to be by far my busiest season ever. I was planning on kind of making the transition from doing this part-time and having a part-time job to really pushing for a full-time singing career this year. It was right after the Pirates of Penzance with Opera Kansas. I came back. I was very, very excited. I had a full season coming up. It was going to be about 60 shows in the summer. And I thought it was okay. If anything, this is going to show me whether or not I can or want to do this. This is a company that they're going full bore, and this is real, consistent hard work. We'll see if this is something that I want to do. And then everything kind of hit, and I lost my other part-time job, and that really kind of threw me for a loop. So I didn't do anything for about a month, May, I think it was. I couldn't really find purpose. I was able to find a job driving for Amazon, which wasn't very good for me, as I was spending hours and hours and hours each day having conversations with people in my own mind and coming home angry and bitter, and conversations with my wife that I didn't actually have, that I just had while driving through some back road. And towards the beginning of August, I was driving and I saw a bumper sticker of all things that said, "If nothing changes, nothing changes." And I'm like, you know what? If I don't do something about this, I'm gonna be driving a truck. Nothing's gonna happen. I'm not gonna get out of this funk. When things start to happen again, I got to be ready for it. So since then, I started trying to study again, trying to find places that I can practice. Incredibly annoying my neighbors with high notes. I'm finally getting back into it. And the Roger and Hammerstein concert that we did with Loveland, as well as the Bohème I did with Boulder, were really, really helpful to just kind of pull me out of the funk and just kind of being downtrodden about life. There were a couple good things that happened with this kind of everything slowing down. Dana was kind of mentioning a little bit of the idea of becoming an artist and self-care a little bit. You have time to do that, and that's a focus. And I've become much more okay with how I sound and how I portray this. I don't have to sound, I don't have to look like Kaufman. I'm going to do it the way I do it. If that's not what you don't want, don't hire me. If it is, awesome. This is how I do it, and not being afraid or ashamed of how I do it if it's not like how somebody else does it, which I don't think would have happened. Like that realization of I got to go out and I got to do what I do best wouldn't have happened without this shutdown. So I'm hoping coming on the other side of it, whenever that happens, better. Things are already starting to come up for the future. I've got a couple of modern opera stuff that hasn't quite been solidified, but hopefully we'll be doing stuff in the spring and summer. So he's getting back in there, but it was definitely has its downs, has had its kind of crushing blows, but in that there was a lot of growth that happened. I hope that's clear.
Definitely. So Andrew, Dana, and Nathan kind of talked about what they've learned through this. What have you learned through this experience?
Oh man, I feel like I could write a book about the last year of life. It's been a bit of it's been phases. That's really just the only way to say it. When this thing came tumbling down, I'm very much a positive mental attitude sort of human. I'm like, it's gonna be great. It's awesome. Just means more practice time. We're gonna be fine. We're gonna be out for a few weeks, but it's gonna be great. And the few weeks turned into a few months, and the few months turned into longer. And so for me, the pandemic looks a little bit like this. I lost all my jobs, got really pumped about being able to work on some music that I'd been wanting to work on, and had no reason to. So I got nothing but spare time. So let's really hone the voice. And so I did that for about 6 weeks, really started working on Winterreise, for instance, and it's just like some stuff that I've really always wanted to sink my teeth into. And then the realization that this was not going anywhere. When the fall jobs started to get canceled, that was a tough pill to swallow. First of all, financially, very difficult, but second of all, okay, now we have to like find something to do. One of the challenges that Megan, my wife, and I ran into is the fact that I was a full-time singer, which meant I went state to state to state to state. And so we actually didn't qualify for unemployment because each state called us underemployed. So we haven't seen a dime of unemployment in this entire pandemic. It's been challenging at times. I was able to kind of fall back on my skill set. Before I ever did opera, I was a marketing professional. So went back into doing that on a full-time basis and doing some singing. And then a little bit like our friends, I actually went quiet. I stopped singing really for a while, just shut it down, because had to make money, had to figure out what that was going to look like. And then recently, with kind of feeling some commotion, hearing some things about possible gigs and stuff like that, went through the journey of getting rid of what I call vacation voice to my students and such. You haven't sung for a little while and everything just feels, whoa, what's going on? But really it was fun to rediscover that, that technique. It's still there. It's still really solid. I went through a couple of days of just literally like 2 days of vocal fatigue and then totally fine. And so and now on the horizon, I just did a recording for American Lyric Theater with a brand new opera that is going to be released later this month. So that's fun. I'm going to out on the West Coast to sing Don Pasquale. I don't know how much I can say about that because the contract just got inked this week, but that's coming up in the spring. So really, it has been a year of just total phases, like positivity, I'm going to work on my voice, to, okay, maybe this chapter of my life is over, and to going quiet, to reinventing myself, to having singing come back around now. It's really that this year has had those kind of 4 emotional phases, those 4 seasons, if you will. And I'm just really, I'm really blessed. I'm blessed to have had something that I could fall back on for financial support. And also super blessed to see some things coming back around, because man, I can't tell you how exciting it is to be making some art. Being able to just say, okay, here's a new opera that I'm recording professionally, or here's a title role. Holy crap, gotta get ready for the spring. So it's been a journey, but that's kind of been my iteration of it, if you would.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate all of you being really honest. I think it's important for people to hear, not that we're the only business that has suffered or the only profession that has suffered, but I think it's important for people to know what it's like to be an artist during this time. Juliana, do you want to tell us a little bit about what it's like to be an opera company during this time?
When all this happened, I felt like my heart had been ripped out of me, because I could see that it wasn't safe to rehearse together anymore. It wasn't safe to perform. And the more I heard about the effects of aerosols and the distances that the aerosols traveled, and it was just hitting way too close to home, because this is what you work your whole life for, and now it's just being ripped away. And so I went through a real stage of grief. It affected me physically, it affected me emotionally. But I had the very good fortune of working with Tim Kennedy, our artistic director, who is always very positive. And he said, you know, we've just got to reinvent this whole thing. We've got to think different. We've got to think out of the box. We can't just stop. We've got to keep going. And I didn't want to stop. I've worked too hard my whole life to make this happen. And by gosh, it wasn't going to stop. And so we decided we would turn around 180 degrees, and we would go virtual. And within 1 month, we had our first virtual recital. And we had a recital every month. But I have to say that that was all made possible because of a dear friend of mine who remembered me in her will and wrote a check for $10,000 from her estate right before the pandemic hit. And in talking with Rob and with Tim about it, we decided we would take that money and we would create these recitals, these virtual recitals that would not only keep Loveland Opera Theatre going, but would help our dear friends and singers that we loved so much that we had absolutely no income. They had no way of making a living, and this could be an artistic endeavor for them to keep them singing. Because the thing is, if you stop singing during now a whole year, you just can't gain it back. You can't gain the muscle tone back. And so we decided it was really important to try to inspire our singers to create and to sing and to keep going. So we used that money, and that made it possible to do 6 recitals. And then doing our Rodgers and Hammerstein concert, which had to be postponed. It was originally scheduled for October, but during production week, someone from the staff got sick. And so we had to cancel the whole thing. Andrew, very similar to what you were talking about. You know, you're in production and there it is. And the whole big thing is rolling. And then all of a sudden, you have to bring it to a screeching halt. It's really terrifying. And so we rescheduled it for January. And we made it happen. And it was fabulous. And everybody was just so joyous to be in the theater again and to be singing with each other. And oh my goodness, I cried every night of rehearsal because it was just such a huge relief to me to be able to be creating again. So we're looking forward to continuing in this route with these vlogs now. We're planning to do performances in the summer and also in the fall. And as things are opening up, we can get more capacity in the theater, and it's looking very positive for the future. And I know that you all feel the same way, but I can't wait to get my vaccine so that I can be safer during the process. So that's what it's been like. And if I wouldn't have had my dear friend Tim Kennedy to turn it around for me, I don't know what would have happened. But Tim, you've been instrumental in making all of this keep going, and I'm so grateful to you.
Well, just like all of you, I've learned all kinds of new skills during this process too, but it's been great because we could keep some art alive, even though it's not the same. You know, I remember at the beginning talking to so many different artists that are in the production end of things, whether they're directors or producers or artistic directors and stuff. And one of the things they struggled with was, how do we do this if we don't have the live art form? Because that's what we've all trained to do, is perform it live for audiences. And, you know, it's been a struggle because I listened to one theater I know say, if it's not live, it's not what we do. So we're just not going to do anything. And I just kept looking at that and going, I just don't think that that's going to be feasible for us to survive this. But it also is, you know, my philosophy is we as artists should be the leaders in thinking of new ways to do things, no matter whether it's in a hard time or in a good time, that we should be always be on the front end of pushing society and things along. And so so I'm really proud that Loveland Opera has been able to kind of live through that philosophy and has tried new things, and we a lot of times didn't even know. It's so interesting even to watch the first few recitals that we did. Speaking of that, Andrew, you did our second virtual recital with your beautiful wife.
We absolutely did. That was, man, that was such a foray into figuring the whole recording thing out, and it's amazing because I have since gone back and looked, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we were such virtual noobs. It's like because it's true. I mean, it hasn't been a learning curve. Now, of course, most of us as professional opera singers, we've got all the recording setup that you want. We've got like multiple mics and backdrops and lighting and like and all of this stuff that we've had to get to kind of keep ourselves going. But I look back and I'm like, oh gosh, that was rough, but we got it done, and it was amazing to be able to make some art. But yeah, that was a lot of fun, and that was our first foray into an actual virtual concert. I had done some like aria recordings for Tulsa Opera, but as far as doing an entire set, that was the first go, and boy, did we learn a lot.
So let's take a look at that and see where we've come from. We're going to take a look at an aria from Don Giovanni, the Madamina. You want to tell our audience just a tiny bit about it before we watch it?
Sure, absolutely. I think this is like take 19 for me when I was recording it. But Madamina, the aria, is a lot of fun. This is the character Leporello, who is talking to Don Elvira about the fact that Don Giovanni has been with all of these other women in all of these other places, and don't think for one moment that you're special, because this is just what he does.
Great.
Madamina, il catalogo è questo, delle belle chiamo il padron mio, il catalogo è che io fa trio, osservate, leggete con me, osservate, leggete con me. In Italia 640, in Alemagna 231, 100 in Francia, Turchia, 91 mai in Spagna. Ma in Spagna son già 1003. 1003. Ma fra queste contadine, cavalieri cittadine, fa contese baronesse, Vargas, principessa e vandali d'ogni grado, d'ogni forma, d'ogni età, ogni forma, d'ogni età. In Italia 640, in Alemania 231, 100 in Francia, in Turchia 91, ma in Spagna, ma in Spagna son già 1003. 1003. Ma per questa gradine, cavalieri, cittadine, ma contesse, baronesse, marchesane, principessa e vandale, in ogni grado, in ogni forma, in ogni età, ogni forma, ogni età, ogni forma, ogni età.
That's the only thing that's been worse than you reading my bio so far.
It's so hard to watch yourself, isn't it?
I'm telling you what, it's amazing how far we have come as truly recording artists in the last year. It's amazing. I'm looking at that going, oh gosh, oh no, the lighting is all wrong. The mic is all wrong. Oh man, but what an adventure. What an adventure it's been. Thanks, Tim.
Sure, we've learned a lot. I mean, what is it like just to sing with a headphone in your ear? I mean, that alone, it was just such a change, right?
It's so I still hate it. I like, let's be honest. I'll be completely honest. I can't stand it because there are certain formants that I hit that I can't hear it at all. Like it's bizarre. Like for me, really like middle top before the turn. Not to get all weird and pedagogical, but if I'm like in that upper, there's so much vibration happening here that it's very, very difficult to pick it up. And I've gotten to where now with my recordings, most of the time, what I will wind up doing is I will more information than anybody needs, but I will actually take the recording and I will video myself conducting along with the recording so that I'm then watching myself conduct the recording so that if I can't hear it, I know how to follow. But that's all been learned in the past year from like tons and tons and tons of trial and error.
I did that conducting as well. That helps so much because where's the downbeat? Where's the downbeat?
Exactly. Yeah, because and I'm sure for you, Nate, as a tenor as well. I mean, some of those formants hit, and it's like I'm in a room. I can't hear this little earbud. It doesn't. It's like it doesn't even.
As soon as I get like B flat B to the C, it sounds so small, and then I go back, and then I go back down to middle of the staff. Sounds much richer and fuller. I'm like, have I lost all my projection on the top?
Yeah, it's been bizarre, but yeah. So learning to follow along. We went from having accompanists that followed our breathing to moving into a world where we were trying to hang with an accompanist, and especially if it was somebody who was recording a track for you that you hadn't worked with very much. Just so many learning curves. It's been an adventure, but it was really fun to watch that and see how far we've come as recording artists in a year. And man, I am really looking forward to on March 30th our Pasquale rehearsals start, and I will be singing with a live pianist in a room, and I'm positive I'm going to be an emotional basket case, but it'll be worth it.
Totally. What are some other weird performance experiences and learnings you've had during this to try to just create some art for either companies or for yourself as you've gone through this?
So the Bohème we did with Boulder in November, it was a socially distanced Bohème. So for the majority of the time we had masks on, with the exception of arias and certain duets and things like that. But we had to stay as far apart from each other as possible. The whole premise with Rodolfo and Mimi is he touches her hands, and that was a big no-no. We ended up fixing it so we were both wearing big gloves at the time, but it was interesting to have to figure out how to play what you want to do without doing it. Because of the natural instincts, especially like in the Act 1 scene between Rodolfo and Mimi, they get to know each other, and then they kind of fall in love right there, love or lust or whatever you want to call it. But doing that without getting closer than 6 feet away from the person it forced me to evaluate that in a different way. But like, okay, I know what I can do here. Okay, so you go behind the soprano, you kind of hold her like this. You can both see the conductor. You're fine. That's what you do. And not being able to do that, like, okay, I've got to come up with something different. I got to come up with new ideas, how to portray the same thing without actually doing it. And that was it was a hard learning curve, but maybe think about it in a different way as opposed to just going through the motions, which I think is a great thing for opera in general, to think about things in a new way.
Dana, how about you? You participated in our Rodgers and Hammerstein live stream, which is a whole nother kind of new experience, because at least you're not in your bedroom or your living room trying to create music with a recording, but now you're doing it without an audience in a theater. What was that like?
Well, it was just really nice to be in a theater and to sing on a stage and have a band playing with you. So I was so grateful for that experience, but it was difficult not having an audience there and knowing the platform in which we were performing, that it was virtual. So, things had to be done maybe a little bigger. And I mean that was hard. I'm finding any technical difficulties on my end. I'm seeing it more with teaching and navigating that world of teaching through Zoom, playing with other platforms, and trying to. It's a real key to making sure your communication is clear, and just navigating that world. That has been not fun. I am excited to be in person again, just with everything. Technology is not my favorite when it comes to this stuff. Even I'm trying to learn, but it's just so much of my brain energy I want to do with other things than trying to figure out what kind of mic I need and what kind of headphones I need. Like, the most I did was buy a new phone, and that was huge for me. I mean, that was huge for me. So yeah, I'm a little slower on that end with navigating that world.
Well, then, unless technology was something you enjoyed beforehand, it wasn't something that we all spent a lot of time thinking or talking about.
It should have been a class in school. We should have had a class in school to teach us how to do this.
The technology is like, it takes like three or four times the time to actually get that handled than it actually does making the art. So, you sing your piece, and then it takes you 3 to 4 hours to put it together with the accompaniment that you have from here and here, and then make sure that there are no background sounds in your voice, in your section or their section, and get rid of the bathroom door you accidentally left open on the side corner, things like that. It's like 2 or 3 times. It takes a huge amount more time than it would just going to a city, standing in front of 3 or 4 people, singing your thing, and they say, "Well, thank you for coming," and that would be it. Definitely. Yeah, the technology is a huge curve. I find it kind of fun, but
yeah. Well, the other thing
I've got it personally.
The other thing that I think that I've seen true across all of my artist friends is we have a high level of expectation of what a recording is supposed to sound like. Because when we do a recording, it's got to be like primo, right? And so instead of going and performing on stage where, hey, look, it's live theater, it's not going to be perfect. You're never going to have a perfect show. Into our live theater becoming recordings was like mayhem. And so, like, for instance, this exact, I was not exaggerating. I bet you I sang Madamina 22 times before I finally was like, fine, I just can't anymore. Because we're such perfectionists in regards to our recordings that finding the understanding of it's not going to be perfect, it's never going to be perfect, even on a recording, and just putting out the best you can, that's been a huge learning curve as well.
I'm interested to see as we take that from this experience, what that does for us as artists also on the farther side out of here.
I was just going to say, on top of that, that's always been my struggle because, as young artists, that recording is a difference between getting either another audition or a job. And so there has been an expectation on us from the beginning that what you put out there needs to be your absolute best. And so now in this world, where we are forced to record everything we do right now, we're in this mindset, instead of being a little bit more forgiving to ourselves, to be like, can't we just create something just to create, flaws included? Because right now I'm not trying to get a job, with something. I just want to create something that puts a smile on someone's face, and makes people feel connected. So that's like a mental barrier on my end of getting past. I mean, I don't push a lot of content out there because I'm like, oh, there's this one note is not good, or this phrase sucks, because I'm thinking as an adjudicator. And it's so it's a toxic in a way. And so it's taken a lot of time to mentally get past that as an individual artist.
So speaking of singing for a recording, Dana, you and Nathan were involved in our Rodgers and Hammerstein Jubilee, and you sang a great song from Allegro, a song that a lot of people aren't as familiar with as some of the other Rodgers and Hammerstein songs that we had in the program. You want to talk about just a quick introduction to that song?
Yes. So this piece, sometimes you'll hear it as a nice, like, sexy jazz standard, but in this context, she is basically, you know, it's a love-hate relationship with her boss. She loves him, but he drives her crazy. So she wants to like stick it to him, but she also wants to kiss him or something. And so it's just this back and forth of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here.
That's a great introduction. Let's take a listen.
The boss gets on my nerves. I've got a good mind to quit. I've taken all I can. It's time to get up and get and move to another job or maybe another town. The gentleman burns me up. The gentleman gets me down. The gentleman is a dope, a man of many faults, a clumsy Joe who wouldn't know a rumba from a waltz. A gentleman is a dope, and not my cup of tea. Why do I get in the dither? He doesn't belong to me. He's somebody else's problem. She's welcome to the guy. She'll never understand him half as well as I. The gentleman is a dope. He isn't very smart. He's just a lug you'd like to hug and hold against your heart. The gentleman doesn't know how happy he can be. Look at me crying my eyes out as if he belonged to me. He'll never belong to me.
The ending of that is my favorite part. Awesome. What's it like to sing and find energy? You know, a lot of performers talk about the fact that we get energy when we're performing from the audience. What's it like to have to kind of create that energy for yourself?
I was just so happy to be there. That I think that energy just came from a change in my day, and just having some hope of music coming back and live performances. And that night was really special because I had family all over the country tune in, and I was really surprised by it. I had family in New York who stayed up, and my brothers, who I don't think have really heard me do a lot of singing. And in a way, it just felt like everyone was connected in that moment. And so knowing that, that gave me so much energy, because I was like, we are bringing a live performance, something people haven't seen, with great music. And I feel connected to more people than I've had in a really long time.
That's been another big positive of this. I mean, you know, we've seen that at Loveland Opera, where we have YouTube fans from all over the country and the world now, because you know, they knew Andrew, and so they wanted to come watch his concert. And then they're like, yeah, this company does some nice stuff. Let's keep up with what they're doing, you know? And it's kind of the same thing for singers. I think, you know, we've all been, as singers, you all have been seen by audiences that maybe you would have never been seen by without some online. So that, you know, hopefully that's something that we'll be able to kind of keep alive as we move through this process. So let's
sorry to interrupt. I do have to say, what also gave me energy was listening to the guys behind me, because every night it was a little different. You could hear them do a few riffs and you're like, "Ooh, that was fun." And then you were almost distracted. And so there was a lot of energy that came, at least for me, from that, and
Sure.
reuniting with all my all old and new friends. I mean, there was so much like catching up we did, and it was just so much fun. So just all of that. I think being around people that aren't the people you're quarantined with gives you energy.
And the collaboration with a musician in the same room, it's like what Andrew's talking about with a live pianist. I mean, there's just nothing that replaces that when you're, you know, even if you're doing a virtual ensemble and putting 20 people together, they're all doing it on their own and there's no collaboration or listening to something you're like, oh, I like how you're doing that. I'm going to add this to it because of that, you know? So that makes total sense. So let's talk about the things that we're going to come out of COVID, that the opera world, that we as performers in the opera world, what are we going to take with us out of this that we hope will maybe change the world of opera just a little bit and the state of opera?
I think in general, I've noticed that this has shifted into opera in the direction where we should have been going. You know, a lot of times, and I'm talking about companies nationally, you know, you were mentioning earlier that a lot of people are like, no, we're just not doing anything because we do live performances. And yes, like opera is all about the live performances, but it's also about adapting to the world we are in now, and how do we get new people to join us? And that is sometimes through a virtual platform, whether we are in a pandemic or not. And so I think moving forward now, we need to keep up with these innovative ideas and projects. And you know, a friend of mine, Zachary James, an incredible baritone, he put out a visual album of contemporary women composers, you know, just really fun things like that. And so I think as artists, we need to be first feel like we are creating for ourselves. We're singing for us and not for a panel of judges or whatnot. But also, how can we continue to be innovative in everything we do to be more inclusive and bring in younger audiences, you know, and use the tools at our disposal to keep this art form moving forward.
Nathan and Andrew, do you think that now that the virtual kind of training has had to happen by force, that singers will be able to maybe have more control of their own careers? I mean, it kind of was, you didn't have a career unless a company hired you pre-pandemic. Do you think that shifts at all?
Really good question. I'm going to jump in here because I literally had our roster call yesterday. I'm on Uzan's roster, UIA, and Vanessa's absolutely fantastic, and she's been, her and the entire team. They've
just
been
for our audience, will you explain what being on a roster means?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so sorry. So it means that my agent, the team that manages me and manages my schedule, they're up in New York. It's UIA Talent. Vanessa Uzan and her brilliant team, and so they are the ones that they keep up with me. They make sure that I'm on my A game, and they also handle a lot of go between some companies and myself. And so they are my agent. That's the old school speak, and they just they're partnered with me in my career is really what that is about. They have had weekly calls with the roster since this pandemic began, and it has not shifted. They've not once dropped one. They've not once said, guys, let's not do this. I can't say enough. Absolutely phenomenal. But anyway, she was just literally talking about this yesterday on our call, that some things have changed, but some things have not. For instance, having recent recordings, that was one of the things that she talked to the entire roster about. She was like, you need a recording that's less than 6 months old. And why? Because now they're coining 12 months or older as pre-pandemic. No kidding. That's the new term. So it's like, okay, all right. And so one of the things that's really fascinating is I want to use something. Dana said something that like I was like, it's so true, and I'm just going to say it, and I hope that Dana, you're okay with this. But she said some of that thinking was toxic. And I think we've seen like this pandemic has really exposed some toxicity in our industry. It really has. You know, we've seen some strange financial decisions at corporate levels of opera. And we've seen some grassroots opera companies like Loveland really come through for their artists. There is a shift happening, but man, there is an old way of thinking that's just never going to go away. One of the things that Vanessa talked about was the fact that a lot of these people aren't going to be doing in-house auditions in New York. They're not, because it doesn't make any sense. But they also want to see a recent recording of, and so it's this strange blend now, in a way of well, we're not going to audition in person, but we also need to know that. So the haves and the have-nots, that gap, as it were, in opera, is almost in a way widening, as opposed to what you just asked him, which is, can people kind of create their own sort of career? Because there has been this wash of content from opera singers. So it's fascinating, and I'm not an opera director. I would actually really love to hear from Juliana on this, because she is an opera director, and I'm fascinated to know, as a regional, you know, as what I would consider to be my favorite kind of like grassroots regional company, what does it mean for you? Because what we're hearing as the professionals in the industry from our agents, they're saying you got to have an updated recording, and it's got to be 6 months or earlier, because anything older than that is pre-pandemic, and nobody knows how you sound now. Old ways of thinking. Some of the contracts that are coming out have clauses now that are, if we cancel, we'll pay you this much and offer you this much for next season. Like, everything's a little bit bizarre. So some of the thinking is new, but some of the thinking is old, in that, you know, I haven't yet seen directors, and this is why I'm interested to hear from Juliana. I haven't seen directors that are like, cool, we're just going to go check out their Facebook to see what they put up of their recent living room recordings. Like, and so that's it's half an answer and half a question, if Juliana would be willing to chime in.
When I consider an artist, I mean, in the past, all we've really done is in-person auditions. And I totally agree with the fact that we probably can't do that for a while. I would always want to hear a current recording of somebody. Always. And I would ask them to submit one. I wouldn't necessarily go to Facebook and see what they posted. I'd try to be a little bit more private than that, and I'd ask them for a current recording if they could send that.
So can I ask a question here? I don't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's fascinating to me is one of the things that we're experiencing, and one of the reasons I'm really glad to have an agent is the whole, we don't know how big their voice is live. You can't tell that in person. I don't know how their voice hits. I just know what's coming through a microphone. Is that something that you feel, or if you get a recording, you feel good about that person? Or since you've done live auditions and I'm sorry, Tim, I feel like I'm usurping, but since you've done live auditions and that's been your way of doing things, do you feel like you're missing something when you're just getting a recording of the person?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not able to connect with this person on a human level, you know, one-on-one, the chemistry between that you feel when you hear somebody in person. That's missing. And the other thing is, I would love a recording, but if I was really serious about hiring somebody, I would rent a church, and I would You know, I'd wear a mask, the pianist would wear a mask, and I'd ask the singer to perform for me live. I'm not really into hiring people based on a recording, even though that's all I have. You know,
Exactly.
but Tim, how do you feel about it?
I think the reality is, I mean, it depends on the medium that we're hiring for. If we are hiring you for a down the road live performance, I'm going to want to see you live before that performance, because, you know, I just think that there's something to be said. I think that the way that technology has been forced to develop very quickly, and the fact that we all have learned more about it and gotten better equipment, that there are certain things that even, you know, I don't have to have a live recording, but I could give you some specific things that I want to see, and maybe you know, I've seen your initial recording, and I mean, one of the things that's really unique about Loveland Opera, we do callbacks, because we only do right now one main stage show a year, and so if you know, if you go to the Met and you see one bad Rusalka, you're still going to go back to the Met because you've seen 20 other really great productions. But when we do one major main stage show a year, one bad show can turn off a whole set of audience that'll never come back and see us again. And so one of the reasons we've always done callbacks, even though it's really something that we borrow from the theater world, is because we need to make sure that there's something beyond the fact that you can sing. We need to see that you have, that you take direction, that you have some chemistry with the other people that we're looking at putting on stage with you, because 90% of our audience doesn't know the difference between, you know, you and Brent Turfel and Nathan and Pavarotti. And the reality is, it's just the case. You know, 10% would come in and go, well, I like this other tenor better. But 90% of our audience comes to hear great singing, great music, done with really great storytelling. And so
that 90% of the audience is my favorite.
But and you know, and this is definitely a difference between us and La Scala, where, you know, 90% of La Scala's audience is going to boo off the soprano that's not as good as the rest of the sopranos they have on their roster, you know, and so it's definitely a difference. But unfortunately, I have to know that you can interact with people. I mean, I've seen opera with a great voice and they cannot connect with anyone else on stage. And it's been the worst night of opera I've ever experienced, as, you know, as a person who directs. And so I think that's where we have to find, if we have to use the medium of recording, how do we find a way of telling whether this person has some chemistry? How does this person interact with others? And that's just as important for a company like us as the voice. And to the point that we've had auditions before where the best voice didn't get the role because they couldn't act it. You know, and that's part of a very important thing for a company like us. So I think it's going to be different for every kind of level of company and in the kind of company and their philosophy. You know, there are some people that just want a singer that can put out a ton of noise because they have, you know, a 5,500 seat house and they need to make sure the people in the back can hear just as well as the people in the front. And that's a very different company than us with a 400 seat house and an audience that really wants to be told a story.
I tried the young artist edition route this year through recordings and things like that, and a few things that I experienced. One is when it was live, they were at least forced to pretend to pay attention to you for the 5 minutes they were singing. You send somebody a recording, they can watch 30 seconds of it and say fine. When in fact, actually, if you went, you know, later, there's actually a really kicking high C at the end of this one, but all you did was listen to the first part of my English speaking. So the live audition, they were at least had to pretend to pay attention to you for a certain amount of time. In the recordings, it also benefits, similar to how it always has, whoever has the best recording equipment, whoever has the best audio software, whoever has the best space that they can get a hold of to do it. Whereas previously it was, all right, you're all same boat, we're all doing it right here, you all have pianists, you all have the same acoustics, everything, boom, boom, boom. Whereas now, someone that maybe knows how to work the electronics better, can afford a couple of mics, multiple mics, knows how to put them together, all of a sudden that recording is going to sound so much better than somebody in their living room with an iPhone, no matter how great the iPhone is. It's not going to sound nearly as good as this other person. So you're getting benefits from different things than what you were before. Like Andrew said, it feels like it's widening the gap. Also, from my experience, I have gotten very few jobs off of an audition. For instance, Loveland, Juliana, for Pirates, Juliana asked me to audition after seeing me sing in Carmen. Okay, so that wasn't just an audition. It was, you've seen me do things, you know, you have an idea of how I work on stage. Now come and audition. With Boulder Opera, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of shows with them. That's one of the only times when I've gone into an audition without like knowing people, without having them had me seen me do things, and actually gotten in there. Most of the time, it's we needed a tenor, and our stage managers worked with you. Can you sing this? Or seeing an audition post and saying, oh, hey, I've done that role before, and I have connections to these other people. I've worked with them and stuff like that. I don't know if that's been other experience, but that's been my experience and how I actually get jobs. It's not very much by auditioning. And now that we're not really having those performances and those networking kind of events and happenings, it's so much more difficult to get into wherever something is happening, especially into someplace new. And I don't know how recordings and technology are going to weave their way through that without isolating a lot of people, a lot of artists away from their goal. That makes sense?
No one's ever saying they need a mezzo or soprano. So
sorry.
I mean, I think you make a good point. I mean, I think it shows that there's some really positive things that can come out of this, and there's also some things that could possibly set people back. I think the other thing it shows is, in some ways, you all are going to be on the same level, maybe as not people who are, already have, international careers, but, people who are just starting their careers at the same level. But I think there will be an even field at the beginning of this, because they're kind of going to be starting from scratch in a lot of ways, unless they had, like the Met, 4 to 5 years of casting already out, and they're just trying to figure out what shows they're going to pull from that. But yeah, I see both sides. There's some pluses and minuses. But I also think, if you look at the theater world, how many people have kind of trudged their own way by creating a career by online media. Is that possible in the opera world as well? It'll be interesting to see.
I don't know if it's necessarily possible in the old model of what opera is. I'm hoping that one thing that comes out of this pandemic is opera starts to accept the changing mediums, because it's written for the stage. It's awesome for the stage. It's great to be on the stage. But we also have the technology and the ability to watch these awesome things from your living room in Peabody, Kansas, where there's no way those people are going to see art like this without taking a couple of days off to go to a city somewhere. So there's that, and I'm hoping that becomes, because part of it. Yeah,
I know we could probably talk about this for another few hours, and I'm sure that over more coffee or beer we could do it. But I want to keep moving along. So I want to go a little bit kind of pre-COVID and talk about, some of the people who are watching us are going to be huge opera fans and know everything about what's going on in the business. But some people might have maybe a bit more of a basic view of opera, and again, this older school idea that opera is about somebody standing on the stage, park and bark, doesn't move around. Can we talk a little bit about kind of pre-COVID, what was going on in the kind of state of opera, what was changing, what was moving, and then what of those things do we see kind of continuing to move once we are able to get back into the live medium kind of more full-time?
Well, what I've noticed is just, new works that are, based off of real life experiences, whether it's like actual events that have happened in our history, stories on real people. And, my favorite person ever is Jake Heggie, and everything he produces is just so accessible. And so you're seeing a lot of these works come out, and the Met was planning to do Dead Man Walking with this coming year, so you started to see the Met finally do some things like that. I mean, that Man Walking came out, what, 2000, 2001, and only in just 2020 they lined that up in their season, you know. So we see, not to like bash on the Met, but you know, they're the company that everyone else kind of looks for changes, but we're seeing regional theaters do that. So we're seeing works like that more often. Philadelphia, Opera Philadelphia does such an incredible job with their fest lineup and with new works, new productions of like the Magic Flute, and forgive me, I forget whose production that was with the whole with the background. Oh, I'm botching
the
this.
projections and the filming.
Yes, the projections, you know, just things like that. I mean, it's really incredible, and you get to see these production, you know, and true opera goers, they probably see Magic Flute a billion times. So seeing it done in a completely different light is really exciting. And it's really exciting for me to see that. And so I think, so that's like a lot of what I was seeing, and I hope we keep seeing, especially new works. I mean, I want a platform where composers and singers can be just getting together more often, just to be creating new things.
So new works are important. I think that people aren't as aware of how many new works are being written in the opera genre, you know, on a continual basis. I think it's interesting that the Met is, you know, sometimes the last company to produce something new, but I think some of that also is it goes back to that there's an old guard, you know, at the Met. There's definitely people who want to see traditional at least titles. But let's talk about also concepts. I mean, you know, you're seeing, you know, there was a La Boheme done in Europe that was set in space. It was like on Mars or something, you know. Like, let's talk about, you know, walking into a show where, you know, it's set in Shakespearean time, or it's set in, you know, the Victorian era, and you know that, and then all of a sudden, you know, a director comes in and says, we're going to set this in Las Vegas, and you know, what do you think about that kind of conceptualization of opera?
I think if it tells the story, then, I mean, sending something like a La Boheme in space, that's crazy. I mean, like, how can you tell La Boheme in space? But if you're taking an opera that really can fit into a modern time or a different time period, I love that, because it just kind of opens up creativity as long as it tells a story. And for me, like, I like to cater to the first time opera goer, you know, so what will hook them, you know, it can be a traditional stage production, or maybe it is a modernized vision, and will it get them back? So I think if it tells a story, and we are, you know, being accessible, that's important.
Opera loses its power if it can't connect. That's all it boils down to. The purpose of creating a concept is for it to connect to more people. If you're creating a concept just for the heck of creating a concept and doing something new or different, you just missed the point. You missed it completely. I also think that this is the difference that we're going to see moving out of this pandemic into theaters, realizing there's one of the things that you can't say it enough, is that opera directors, when talking about doing a show, they need to know that they're going to have an audience. They need to know that they're going to have butts in the seats and people who come to see this thing, because that's how opera companies make their money. And so knowing that that is in jeopardy and could change literally at any minute. We got new strains of COVID now roaming about the country. Like, it's constant shift possible at any time. What I think would be feasible is local opera companies investing in production quality media, talking about cameras and mics, to create a live presence if somebody needs to tune in online. So that's something that most regional opera houses haven't invested in. They don't have a red cinema camera lens laying around. They don't have really baller condensers to mount on the corners of the stage. But I think that it's possible that that could be a new wave of doing things. I don't think we need new concepts so much as we need to find a way to connect. One of the beautiful things that Dana said was that she had people who stayed up in New York just because they wanted to hear her sing. Well, that's awesome. We have like a new avenue there to move our art forward, but it's not going to move it forward with an earbud and like trying to hang on to a piano track. We're like, if we're going to do the virtual thing, it can't be some bird's eye camera in the back of the house that's trying to capture the stage. It's going to have to be done fairly well in your face. And you don't have to be Met HD, right? But you do have to give people the experience, because the power of opera, we lose the power of opera when it doesn't connect, whether that's a concept and needing to update the concept. For instance, Magic Flute, of course, I sing a bunch of Zarastros. That's a concept that you got to update it. You can't, we're not going to go just full bore into all the misogyny and racism that Magic Flute carries with it. So that's a concept that needs to be updated to connect. But we also, I think, in the local houses, we have to find a technological way to connect with the people who, they're still going to be afraid, guys, masks or no masks, to go and sit in an auditorium right next to somebody. These are things we have to think about.
Yeah, I was thinking that exact thing just this week. I was looking to try to find a high quality performance of a Rake's Progress, and I'm like, okay, the only things I was finding was bird's eye camera from the top, not quite good quality. I couldn't really hear the singers. The singer was a good singer, like I knew the name. I think it was Jerry Hadley. It was an older recording. Great tenor, fantastic tenor, but the quality was so fuzzy. I couldn't see, I couldn't hear it. It didn't do it justice. And really, the only place you can get those really nice recordings right now are the Met, the Met HETV. I don't know if Royal Opera House does. I think they do a few of them at a time, but there aren't many places to go out and find that medium. I think you're exactly right.
So speaking of bird's eye view, prior to this year, Loveland Opera has filmed all of its previous productions, but usually it's just for archive purposes and for the cast to have a recording of it. So Nathan, you were in a production of The Merry Widow with us. It was the opera by Otto Nicolai, which is not as well known as Verdi's take on that Shakespeare play, but is a great production or a great version of that.
Do you mean The Merry Wives of Windsor?
Yes, what did I say?
I think you said The Merry Widow.
Oh, we did Merry Widow and Merry Wives back to back, and I always confuse the two. It's
that
very
I think The Merry Wives of Windsor, I think, was a great example of changing the time period. So we set it in like the 50s, 60s era, which most of all the people that were attending our show probably had experienced it, whether or not they lived through it or their parents lived through it. So they were looking at something familiar on stage, and it fit really well, I think.
Yeah, and that time period was kind of hot because we'd had a number of TV shows that had kind of been set in that time period as well. And so we hoped that people would connect that way, as opposed to watching a bunch of people in Elizabethan garb walking around the stage. So let's take a look really quick at your second act aria in Fenton's aria, that's the character that you played in The Merry Wives of Windsor. You were joined on stage with Sean Stevenson and Rob Hoch on that. But yeah, that was a conceptual piece, something that took something that's set in Elizabethan times and brings it to a bit more of a recognizable time for some of the audience. But unfortunately, if you look at it, even compared to the Rodgers and Hammerstein Jubilee, which the Rialto Theater has made the investment that you're talking about, Andrew. They have spent the money to allow live streaming now in their space. And now that they've spent that money, it can happen post-COVID as well. And so we can possibly have the option of offering people who are not comfortable to come to one of our productions the opportunity to watch it live or live streamed while it's going on in the theater with an audience. So that's definitely something we'll have that will be better than just even that video, which is a great video of Nathan singing a beautiful piece.
Yeah, the equipment the Rialto got is really nice. Like that recording came out quite well.
Yes.
Of the Roger and Hammerstein.
And that's going to be huge, right? I mean, we have to realize that we're entering a new age of opera, where regional opera for a while is going to be king, in my opinion. The large corporate level opera houses, they're going to be slow to open. They have to be slow to open.
Also, a lot of the big houses, they're just not doing anything. Yeah. They're not coming up with the innovative ideas.
Well, and I think to move a massive machine like the Met or whatever, it just is way more expensive and way harder to do. Who do you pay? Who do you not pay? Where, when we're an agile small company, we can make those moves way quicker and it doesn't cost as much to do them. Even though it has a huge learning curve and costs money, it's not the same when you have a 5,500 seat house and a 200 member staff.
No question. And I think, at making that accessible to, if I come up and get to sing with Loveland again in the future, to my family in Virginia to pay $10 for a live stream ticket and actually be able to really feel like they're getting a really good picture of what's happening, that's humongous.
Yeah. And the great thing about opera, as opposed to musical theater, I mean, it's not completely, because as we start talking about new pieces, there becomes copyright issues. But a lot of the pieces that are in the public domain, we can do it without any extra cost, right? Because there's no copyright to have to worry about, or a licensing agency that says, nope, you can't do that. Well, we are getting close to our time, so I want to take a moment now to just go around, and Juliana, I'll have you be last, but I would just love to hear from you a prediction, something that you think is going to come out of this time and is going to kind of stay with us in the state of opera over the next 5 or 6 years as we come out of the COVID pandemic. So I'd love a prediction, and then in 5 or 6 years, we'll do another one of these, and I'll see if you were right. So who wants to go first with a prediction?
I will go first. I'll jump in here.
Great.
This is not only a prediction, this is a hope. I really hope that brave authenticity. One of the things that I have let go of is understanding that no matter how many times I try to record a piece of music, that I'm going to get that perfect performance. And so then realizing that that's not going to happen on a recording. It's certainly not going to happen in the house. So taking myself, bravely authentic, flaws and all, to my art form is going to be huge. And I also mean that on the side of opera as an industry whole. We saw some of these huge corporate houses really not make the right decisions as far as taking care of the artists. And I won't go any further into that, but I have also witnessed companies like Loveland and other regional opera houses say, hey, we love this art form. We want to take care of our artists. And being bravely authentic and moving forward in regards to, this is what we love, and we're doing it because we love to do it. And so my hope is that moving out of this pandemic, is that the artists carry that into their craft. You know, when I step out on the stage going, hey, look, I might get a phone call tomorrow that the next year is completely canceled. So I'm just going to let it fly. You know, taking that into what I do is something I'm very much looking forward to. Because it's happened, and it's something that I can now look back on as, hey, that can happen. So let me bring it today. And also bravely authentic from the standpoint of companies that are really doing this for the love of opera, not just because they're a gigantic corporation trying to move the ship forward.
Yeah, honestly, I don't even know what I was thinking, because what Andrew just said just summed it up perfectly. I love brave authenticity. That is such a beautiful way to describe this going forward. And you know, I think companies, and maybe I think my hope and as well is that artists are a little more vocal about their needs. And I think we're getting into an age where there's more empowerment to be vocal, whether if we're getting treated badly or not. And especially for young artists, the system of the Young Artist Program has not been feasible, and it's not accessible to everyone who is getting into that. I've had to pay off so much student loan debt when I was done with college that my path isn't the path that was supposed to be the right path. And so I see a change in that, because they can't go on how they've been. And it's because we're just going to be in this endless cycle. But basically everything Andrew said, I am on board.
I love the idea of brave authenticity. That's absolutely fantastic. My predictions / hope is a bit more selfish, in the fact that I hope that once things start rolling again, they just snowball. We have gone, not only as performers, but opera lovers, fans of the arts, have gone almost a year without. And that when we start to figure out how to do this, all of a sudden it hopefully becomes something that is not on the side, but something that is principled, something that is important. When looking at funding for school boards, they say, okay, the arts are important. Look what happened this year where we didn't have any. This is something that is important, and it has value to society and an economy and things like that. I don't know if that will happen, but I could see that happening after a year of not having it. You don't value something until it's gone a little bit.
Juliana, what are your hopes and predictions for Loveland Opera and for the state of opera after as we come out of this?
I predict that people are going to be starved for it. I think they already are. I think we're going to see people just flooding our theaters as much as we can, wanting to be there. I think they realize how much they have missed it. And I predict that once we get over how we can deal with the vaccine and everything and people are safe to be together again, I think you're going to see a real renaissance of the opera audience. I think more people are going to be flocking to it. So I predict that we'll be continuing to pursue new options and different ways of expression and different ways to reach people. We'll always be pursuing that. But I think that people really, really need this and they want it and they're going to be getting it soon. We're going to make it happen.
Come hell or high water, right? Or
right.
COVID. Yeah, I agree with all of you. I think, and my extra hope is, I think the one thing that the medium of having to go online has also allowed is people that maybe wouldn't have tried opera or been able to afford it have been exposed and been able to embrace it. And so I hope we also keep in mind that we, whether it's live or online or live streamed, that we continue to help keep opera something that's accessible to everybody. That's my hope as we come out of this, because I think I have a 95-year-old woman at my church who comes up and tells me every week the 5 operas she watched from the Met, because they're streaming a different opera every night, and she just is so thrilled to get to see things that she would have never had the ability to see any other way. So I hope that continues. I have to do a quick plug, so you all just sit there for a second, as I hope that everybody who's watching this and has enjoyed it will take a minute to check out our YouTube channel. You can see a number of the performances that we watched today, the larger version of them, and you can see the Rodgers and Hammerstein concert that we did, and you can also see Andrew and his wife's virtual recital, as well as a number of other concerts that we had. But also I hope that you will take a moment to go to the Loveland Opera webpage and give a donation. The information is on the screen right now, and if you go there, you can help keep a small company alive, as we've tried to help keep the arts alive during this time. So I hope you'll take a moment to do that. I want to say a huge thank you to each one of you for the time you've given us today. Hopefully, as people have watched this, they've been inspired, but also they've learned some new things about what it's like to be an opera company or an artist in this time period. And I hope that they'll continue to comment and let us know what they want to see as we move forward, as they're watching this in the comments on our YouTube page. So thank you all so much. Anything else you want to say before we go?
Thanks for having us. This has been great.
Awesome.
Thank you for
so much fun.
The three of you. Thank you, and Tim, thank you for moderating. And I hope you'll all stay safe and well and keep singing. Just never stop.
Definitely.
It's so much fun to talk about this stuff with other music and opera people. There aren't rehearsals or things where we get to go and hang out with them for anymore. So this has been a blast. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend.